It started out like any other peaceful afternoon by the lake until a woman I'd never seen before strolled onto my property like she owned the place. She didn't knock. She didn't ask. She just walked straight up to my 150-year-old boathouse with a shiny little key in hand and a whole lot of attitude. She told me she was with the HOA and claimed she had a master key that opened every property in the neighborhood. What she didn't realize, my boathouse isn't part of the HOA. It never has been. I tried to calmly explain that to her. But she wasn't having it. She insisted she had authority and said she was inspecting for unauthorized use. The thing is, this place has been in my family for generations. It's fully independent, legally excluded from the HOA, and her key. It didn't even come close to working. That's when things took a turn. Instead of backing off, she doubled down and called 911, claiming I was aggressive and refusing compliance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stayed calm, kept the cameras rolling, and waited for the cops to arrive. What happened next? Let's just say the truth has a way of coming out. It came out hard. The officers didn't just hear my side. They saw it and the ending. Well, you'll want to stick around for that, because it wasn't me who left in cuffs. Now, before we get to what happened when the police showed up, let me give you a little background, because this wasn't some random misunderstanding. This woman, who neighbors have already nicknamed HOA Karen, has a bit of a reputation. She's known for walking the neighborhood with a clipboard, taking photos of lawns, measuring fence lines, and knocking on doors to give people warnings. Most folks just ignore her, but she clearly doesn't like being ignored. The strange thing is, she only moved into the area about 6 months ago, yet somehow she thinks she's running the show. She claims she's on the HOA board, but no one really knows for sure. I've lived on this land for years, my family even longer, and we've never once been under HOA rules. My property was carved out of the association before it even formed. But apparently, she didn't bother to check those details before. Deciding to play gatekeeper, the boathouse she tried to open has been here since the 1800s. It's old, but it's solid. We use it for family gatherings, fishing gear, and sometimes just a quiet moment by the water. Nothing shady, nothing illegal. But to her, just the fact that she couldn't get inside seemed to make her more suspicious. She accused me of hiding something and even tried to peer through the windows while calling dispatch. I kept calm, but in my head, I was wondering, what exactly did she think she was going to find? And why was she so desperate to get inside? While she was pacing around the boathouse, still on the phone with 911, I couldn't help but think about how far some people will go when they believe they have power. It was like she had convinced herself she was on some kind of mission to clean up the neighborhood, and my historic boathouse was her next target. I stood back, didn't argue, just recorded everything from a safe distance. She didn't know it yet, but that video would become pretty important. A few of my longtime neighbors had started to gather by then, watching from their yards. Some of them had their own run-ins with her small things, like being told their mailbox was the wrong color or being warned about unapproved flower pots. Nothing major, but enough to know she liked to push boundaries. So when they saw her on my land, trying to force her way into a private building, people started whispering and pulling out their phones too. One neighbor, Dave, quietly told me he saw her earlier in the week walking near my dock, looking around like she was taking inventory. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now it was all adding up. It wasn't just a random visit. She'd been planning something that made the whole situation feel more calculated. What was she really after? Meanwhile, she kept repeating to the dispatcher that I was hostile and blocking access to HOA property. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My boathouse, HOA property. Where did she even get that idea? A few minutes later, we heard the sound of sirens. In the distance, that's when things really started to shift. She stood taller, like she thought backup had arrived just for her. She waved the officers down with both arms, pointing at me like I was the criminal. I stayed right where I was, calm, camera still rolling. I had nothing to hide. This was my land, my boathouse, and everything I'd said was the truth. But I knew how situations like this could go sideways fast, especially when false claims are being thrown around. As the officers stepped out of their cruiser, she rushed over to them, speaking fast, loud, clearly trying to control the narrative. She kept calling it community property, saying I was defiant and refusing a board inspection. One of the officers raised an eyebrow right away. He asked for her name and position with the HOA, and you could see she started to fumble. She gave a first name, said she was acting on behalf of the board, but couldn't name a president, couldn't show any ID, and certainly had no paperwork. The officers turned to me next. I handed them my ID and calmly explained the situation. I showed them the old land records on my phone, the documents that proved this boathouse was never part of the HOA. Not now, not ever. I also let them see the video from earlier, where she tried to use that so-called master key. That's when her tone changed. Fast, just when I thought the situation couldn't get more bizarre. One of the officers asked her if she still had the master key she tried using. She reached into her purse and pulled out not one, but an entire ring of keys, at least a dozen of them. She held them up proudly, saying they were issued by the HOA for emergencies. That's when the real twist came. One of the officers glanced at the keys, then looked at her and asked, "Ma'am, where exactly did you get these?" She paused just for a second, but it was long enough. The officer repeated the question, and this time she got defensive. She claimed the keys were given to her by a former board member, but she couldn't name who. She also couldn't explain why she had a key to my place, which had never been part of any HOA jurisdiction. I could tell the officers were starting to get suspicious. One of them stepped aside and called someone probably checking with the actual HOA board. That's when a second patrol car showed up, and right behind it, a man I recognized immediately, Mr. Halford, the current HOA president. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I knew he'd have the answers. He walked up, took one look at her, and asked the officers, "What is she doing here?" Her face went pale. Turns out, she wasn't on the board. She never had been. And Mr. Halford had something to say that would turn this whole thing on its head. Mr. Halford stepped forward, calm but clearly annoyed. He looked directly at the officers and said, "She's not on the board. She never was. We've had complaints about her pretending to be part of the HOA, but we hadn't caught her in the act until now." That's when everything shifted. The officers turned their full attention to her. She tried to backtrack, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just trying to help keep the neighborhood safe. But it was too late. One of the officers asked if she had permission to enter any of the properties with those keys. Mr. Halford shook his head. "Absolutely not. Those aren't even official keys. We don't give anyone that kind of access." A silence fell over the group as the reality sank in she hadn't just crossed a line. She'd bulldozed